All right, it is Friday, June 30th. A little bit after the bell, about 30 minutes after the bell. Let's go ahead and take a look at the price action for the week. First of all, started off this Monday, the big fat red candle down on the NASDAQ and many other indexes, as we'll see. But that ended up getting bought up, and we closed the week very green. Daily chart looks very constructive. You could argue there was a downtrend, potentially having found a top with these topping tails before. But now we've kind of broken that, and it looks good for higher to me. You can always go over to the weekly chart to confirm, and we can see that kind of price action and candle structure very visible here, right? Tried to find a low here, and it got bought up anyway, so this looks pretty good for potentially the NASDAQ seeing around 15,600-ish, and if that breaks through, we could even see very easily here 16,000. I know there's a lot of talk of like, well, this rally's been very parabolic. How much higher can it go before it pulls back? I think the answer is it could go much higher, technically speaking. So things still look good on the NASDAQ for higher, especially after this week's price action. You have anything to add there?
Not at all. It looks like it's going basically straight up.
Yeah, and I think until this week's close, actually today, you could have had a pretty strong argument that it still looked somewhat weak, right? We had this, like, if we go to the 4 hour, this 15,200 level looks like it could have held. We had these really big topping tail there. That looked kind of scary if you were a bull, but the breakout here looks real clean, looks good for higher. And I think we'll see a similar action on all the indexes. Let's go ahead and look at the S&P futures. Similar thing, right? Red day on Monday, it just gets bought up all week. This even looks a little bit cleaner, right? You see this resistance level that it broke through, now acting as support, moving higher. If you're a bear, you want to say, oh, well, there's these topping tails. Okay, I see those. But I think that the candle structure, once again, still looks clearly bullish. You know, we even have the close of this week's green candle on the weekly above the open of last week's red candle. So this still looks good for higher. Targeting probably 4,600s on the S&P, as high as maybe 4,700, right? But we'll have to see. Oops, didn't mean to move that. But I think that if we can close 2 candles on the weekly chart above 4,600, I think we're going to see all-time highs if that happens, 4,800. So that's kind of my, I don't want to call it a prediction, but those are my thoughts. Do you have anything else you want to talk about on this chart before we move on?
Yeah, can we
go ahead?
Here, look at that guy.
The monthly candle, fat. Yeah, I mean, that looks obviously very bullish. You know, we talked about the potential bear case there on the daily chart, but you look at the monthly there, pretty hard to ignore a bullish breakout, right?
So, and that's what's wild about this chart, is that huge monthly candle. It's breaking all this resistance in here, so you're going to find that this is going to turn into support, as well as these wicks if it does get down that low. All these wicks are really good support, or will be, when this all plays out here. But that's what we're looking like. So you'll see, you know, you'll hear on the news that it's recession time if prices start getting down in these areas. But that's definitely buying time.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. You know, even if we get down there, the price structure, price action will still look constructive, right? So let's assume for a moment that we get down to here, right? You would probably say you really want this level to hold. I think you'd be right. And if it doesn't, it's starting to look objectively bearish, right? And that would be a huge retracement.
Right.
Anyway, but even if it got there and held, that would still be constructive price action. It would still be, I mean, it might be a deep higher low, but it's still going to be a higher low compared to anywhere else on this chart, on the monthly candle. Now, that might take, you know, to the latter half of this year, essentially. Well,
right.
I guess we're in the latter half of the year now, but, you know, maybe the last quarter of the year to end up kind of making it there if it did, but it would still look good long term, I think, in my opinion.
I agree.
Cool. Let's go ahead and move on to the small caps, the RTY. Let's go ahead and take a look here real quick on the daily. Ooh, our trade idea was off by a few dollars, but the important thing is we had the right idea. This looks really constructive for higher, right? So we have this kind of consolidation box, this distribution area, if you want to call it that we drew. Perfectly respected as price action here for a higher high, higher low, and we're looking like we're on our way to making a higher high. So this still looks really bullish. You know, small caps have had a good couple of weeks here along with everything else. It's kind of hard to have lost money at this point unless you're shorting, but still looks good for higher here, I think. It doesn't really matter to me that this candle on the daily here, particularly obviously that being today, has a long tail to it. I think we're still firmly in the bullish camp. Every day being green for the whole week is kind of a pretty big indicator of the amount of buying pressure we're seeing in the market.
I really like how quickly it worked out. You know, it came right down just above the level we didn't take a whole lot of time looking at this on the lower time frames to place.
No, we didn't.
But so it came right down and right up. So some people they look at these trade ideas and they're like, yeah, that's not going to play out, or it's going to take forever, and it's not always. Definitely not always.
Yeah. And one thing I will say about that, you know, when you see price move sharply into a level, I think a lot of newer traders, they kind of get scared. They're like, holy moly, price is like really fast approaching my buy even, or my stop loss, and they kind of get freaked out. They're like, oh my gosh, like this has got so much momentum. You hear them say that, oh, there's so much momentum behind this move. I better pull my order, or I better move my stop, or I'll just, you know, kill my trade altogether. It's like, in my opinion, based on what I've seen as a trader, having done this for a few years now, I think that levels are much more likely to hold when you see price move sharply into your levels, because that often happens, you know, on impulse, or even sometimes if it's really, really quick. You see low liquidity moves, so there's not a lot of conviction behind those things. And what you really don't want to see, in my experience, is like price kind of slowly drifting into a level, and then people think, oh, there's not a lot of conviction in this move, I'll definitely go long here, and then it gets there and then it just rips through your level. Just my personal anecdotal experiences, these kind of sharp moves tend to play out more often than the slow drift to death moves, which I like to call them. You have any thoughts on that? I think you and I have similar opinions about that.
No, I agree. When you have those sharp moves, that's when you're going to see wicks, and wicks are where, if you're doing it right, your position should be.
Yeah, there's actually an example of that on this chart in the consolidation area. So we can see, you know, after it kind of, this range that we've been talking about on the RTY quite a bit, you know, the topping range here, bottom range here, kind of had this real sharp move down into this consolidation box. Of course, we hadn't had this drawn at the time, but you see it kind of quickly defining this range, and you see all these bottom really, really long wicks with all these really long tails. And that's indicative of that level being bought up significantly, even after a huge move. And we see, most importantly, when it reaches that area again, it happens again, right? So we see this, these wicks dipping very deeply in there and getting bought up. That's what you want to see. You want to see those quick, sharp moves that get bought up at those support levels. That's how you can have some conviction in, okay, even though price is sharply moving into that level, it's going to hold, or it's at least very likely to hold, so you can have some strong conviction with those trade ideas.
And then the other thing you see with those wicks on the volume, you see all those wicks are the biggest volume wicks.
Yeah.
For quite some time. And then right in here. So anyway.
Looks real good. Yeah. Anyway, that concludes the RTY. Let's go ahead and move on to the Dow. Normally we've been talking about how boring the Dow is. This week it looked picture perfect. So I just want to point out that we had drawn this line, right? So after sort of the recovery from the bear market of 2022, it had, kind of come up and really tried to break out above this level here, about 43,000-ish, 43,400-ish, and just could never keep closing above every time. That's the weekly. Look at the daily. Same thing, right? Sometimes it reaches above there, false breakout basically every time. Got our closes above, 2 closes above. That looks real clean. And then look at this gap on the daily. We came down, filled it, break back out higher. That is textbook bullish, in my opinion. This looks so good for higher. I think it's going to be pretty likely that we could see this near all-time highs pretty soon, unless there's like a quick little pullback here. But overall, I don't really see this moving too much lower before higher. The price action just looks really clean, really bullish to me.
I agree. Mid 35s before we see any retracement for sure.
Yeah, and that would be a pretty good place for, I don't want to say shorting it, but you could pull some off the table if you have some trade ideas here. We do see these tails of these wicks in there, so that's a great place to start. But overall, it still looks like we're in. People are talking about, are we in a bull market? It's starting to look like it, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at gold. Finally see some decisive breaking out of this consolidation area that we've been talking about for a while now. So we got our 2 closes outside of the range, failure to break back in, and closed below again, and then we have the confirmation back below. And we do have this previously tested support level that, we saw this having dipped below that to about 1900, getting bought up, and moving back higher, closing higher above that range. To me, I think we could see this level at 1942, 1936-ish, like somewhere in that little area. We could see that retested again. I think, personally, I do believe gold's going lower at this point. The next untested support is down here, 1874. So I'm looking for that to potentially hold. I think it will hold. The reason I think that is if we look at the weekly chart, that is the next very significant support level that has been untested on this recent run. You could argue, oh, there's a test there. Well, it broke cleanly through that, so I don't consider that a test. But if it stopped there and held, that would be still a constructive look for higher. That would still be a higher low, and we could see that fuel the next move for higher. Now, if the rest of the market continues to be very strong, we could easily see that. Did I just move that? No. We could easily see that kind of consolidate there for a while if it gets there. I'm not calling for that to happen, but I think that's a strong possibility to sort of keep the bull case for gold intact. If we start to see that break a bit lower, that could start to look more bearish. That would kind of ruin the higher low angle of our discussion, but it would still look good as long as it didn't break below 1817. But I guess you can kind of tell where I stand on gold. I'm short-term bearish, long-term bullish, but I still think we're going to see this come down to 1874.
I agree. That's definitely the next spot. We've got that gap there too.
Yeah, that little gap. Perfect.
Perfectly. Yeah. It's like $1 difference, but it's it's like a monthly level here we're looking at, so that's why it's right there. Doesn't look that great on the monthly.
I think it looks okay on the monthly. You can see pretty cleanly the so right here, if I take control 2 seconds, you can see this candle structure here, right? Gets bought. We see that bought up, then it gets sold down directly to that support level, and then we have this close above the red candle, so that looks pretty clean for bullish in my opinion. And we see that touch and then the sell-off, so I still think this looks super clean for higher even on the monthly. Pretty obvious price structure to me. Looks like a pretty great place to have 1874 hold as support.
Yep.
Oops, didn't mean to hit that tool. Anyway, that's gold. Let's go ahead and take a look at oil. Oil has been pretty boring recently. You know, just been talking about it since we started doing these consolidation in this range. The only thing that, let's go ahead and look at the daily. You know, only thing that looks a little spooky if you're trying to long oil right here, which I don't recommend doing. I'll explain why in a second. So we're having this descending top formation, right? The highs keep getting lower, the lows keep holding. So you might say, oh, this is just a, you know, that's a bullish triangle. Well, I see your point, but I don't think that there's a visible support level for some time here. We have one all the way back down here at 53. All the others have been tested. This one has been tested by this tail here. You know, you see these wicks that yep, looks bullish, right? That gets getting bought up, but we keep seeing lower highs. That makes me very uncomfortable and have very low conviction in any trade ideas here. There's just not a proper trade idea that offers good risk to reward ratio until 53.
I agree exactly. It's got to go lower to go up.
Yeah, I think so too. And that will be a significant break because we can see this historically. That level mattered a lot. But I just think that there isn't a lot more direction for oil to find until it goes lower. If we take a look at the monthly, you know, you can see it still would be bullish, right? These are two lows here. Even if it went down to 53, and then you could target way up high there. You might say, well, oil going over 100 again. I don't know about that. Well,
I do.
I think, yeah, I think it's very possible, personally. But you know, that is a longer term idea, unless we get some other geopolitical thing in the way. But anyway, I think these ideas are very much in play. But until oil does something a little more interesting, it's just consolidating in its boring old range here.
Can I look at the monthly again real quick?
Go ahead.
What I see is this trying to fight this level here, where it did have two closes there, but it didn't end up holding that. And now we see these closes here. And so that's why I believe it's just finding support down below before it can go up above and find a new level to test up in this range at all-time high. But that's just me. But that's why 53 is in play, because they need that liquidity to get that high.
Yeah, I also really like that level just because, I mean, imagine the risk to reward on that trade, right? You get it down there and then you target the all-time high, or you could even go just below where that 117 line is that hasn't been tested again. That's a great trade. Anyway, like I said, until the oil does something more interesting, like a big move in either direction, there's not much to say about it other than those ideas.
Right. That's not a new idea.
No, it's not. Let's go ahead and look at the dollar index. Let's take a look at the daily. It does look like it's moving up. Interesting week, right? So started a bit lower, moving down. The thing that we had talked about last week was that it had kind of bounced off this 102, and then last week it had actually found a big move up off that level. So that's looks like potentially a higher low for the next move higher, and we see that kind of being respected this week, right? So it kind of retraced back down to a level above 102, 102.3. It's not a very big level, but one nonetheless. Moving out above, and then having moved above this 103 level that we've drawn out before, and actually retracing back and respecting that, right? Tried to move lower on the candle there, and then moved back up to it. All these things tell me that that is constructive for the dollar. I do see the dollar moving higher. Having tested up at 105 before, I do see us potentially breaking out above that on one of these moves, but it's going to have to break out above that level somewhat significantly. The last top here, which is actually a lower high, was at 104.6 with all those topping tails. I do think that will be broken, and we'll see it at least go back to 105, 105.7-ish right there. But I think it's going to move even higher than that, personally. I think the dollar is going to inflate quite a bit. What are your thoughts on that?
I see the same thing. I see it going higher over the longer term. I see it immediately making it above these and going up to this level because of this right here. Two closes above, so it comes down here, finds support at the last spot, and it's just making its way back up. Now it had to do it again, but nothing goes straight up. So
yeah, it looks pretty clean. I don't really have anything else to add. I feel like we've covered the dollar pretty well. Let's go ahead and move on to the banking index, KRE, the banking sector. If you want to, why don't you start us off with that one?
Well, this week, struggling there. This was last Friday here, so that was the low, and this whole week we spent it going up, except for today where it sold off a little bit. But it is an interesting level it sold off to. You can see that there. It was this. This is the interesting level to hold because it's the last place before the low that it tried to find support here. This it makes it significant, and then it made a new low, and so when it comes back to that area, we do expect it to hold, especially since it made a higher high here. We can also get the weekly. I'm gonna pinch that a little bit, and it's just basically straight up.
Yeah, it looks really clean.
Doesn't look like it's gonna make it to that trade idea, unless it does happen later. But it
I think we placed that just to talk about a good risk to reward ratio trade.
And how even if it went that low, it would still look good.
Yeah, I still think it does. And not only that, I mean, it's just the most obvious trade ever, right? It's below the low of that whole pullback, so if it breaks that, you know, it's going much lower, which we've drawn out. So it's just a good trade. But yeah, I mean, it's still constructive, still long term, still moving up. You know, if you're looking at it on the weekly right now, you see that big red candle from last week, and then failure to close above that, and even having sort of a topping tail on your green candle doesn't look good. But you got to remember, it's still moving up. That's, you know, the trend right now is upward momentum. Until it breaks, I would say below this level. That I know it's been tested, but that's kind of where this. If you look at the weekly here, this wick comes all the way down to and pulls back up. Until we see that go lower than that, I would see this as bullish. I still think it looks good. I still think the banking sector looks strong on this ETF anyway. But unless you have anything to add, I think that should wrap us up. Anyway, okay. Thanks again for tuning into the Trader Hub Weekly Market Review. If you like this kind of content, or a trader yourself, or even just interested in learning to trade, or you're an investor looking to speak with like-minded individuals, and get ideas, bounce them off each other, go ahead and join us on our Discord server. We have a Trader Hub Discord server. It's a community server for like-minded investors and traders, and it's pretty much just a place to come hang out and share your ideas. Anyways, that does it for this week. We'll go ahead and talk to you again next week. Hope you guys have a great 4th of July weekend. Talk to you next week. Take care.